Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Friday, May the 24th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams producing this Come On With edition of the program. So, if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So, nothing quite like a afternoon hockey game. Can't stay up and watch the Western Conference Final. Just can't do it. Watched too many Edmonton-Vancouver games. Ruined me last week. But yesterday at the Worlds, Canada beat Canada won yesterday 6-3, so they advanced to the semi-finals where they get the Swiss. They managed to dodge Sweden because the Czechs upended the Americans, so now they get the Swiss in the semi-final. Okay, so beat Slovakia. Anyway, here we go. Dawson Mercer on the score sheet had an assist on the fifth goal to make it 5-1 at the time. And if you're watching some volleyball, I'll tell you what, I highly recommend it. Watching the Volleyball Nations League. Canada got off to a hot start yesterday against the number one team in the world, Poland. Won the first set 25-18. Then their level sort of dropped off and the Poles picked it up and they lost the four-set match. They got Bulgaria today. Interesting news, for people in the city, my apologies for those outside the overpass for this one. So, lots of attention and focus in the city, not only about the most recent budget and a 13% hike in my property tax, which is all bad enough, but there's so much focus in a budget that's over $300 million about the $7 million subsidy going to St. John's Sports and Entertainment for management of the Mary Brown Centre and the Convention Centre. So, we know the Growlers are gone. It's hard to believe there's going to be another pro hockey team come back to that facility. And this one is getting widely mocked, but hopefully the folks running the St. John's Junior Caps and their players and supporters can ignore it. They're going to take their games. Their home games are going to be played at the Mary Brown Centre. Now, people will say, well, they're not going to be able to draw flies. Hopefully they do. A few game nights down at the Mary Brown Centre is a good thing. Pretty cool facility to play some junior hockey in. So good luck and congratulations to the St. John's Junior Caps. Hopefully they have some success down there. I'm not sure what their break-even number is regarding the number of tickets they're able to sell per night, but I wish them good luck. Why not? I have a soft spot in my heart for that junior league, as you know. Big weekend for motorsports enthusiasts. Well, on Saturday, I guess the tale will be told in the Formula One race in Monaco and the tight, twisting streets of the principalities. So generally, you win the pole, you win the race. But on Sunday, Monaco in the morning, the Indianapolis 500 in the afternoon, and the evening, NASCAR's one of their premier races, the Coca-Cola 600 for motorsports enthusiasts. Sunday will be a long day. Okay, let's take our conversation to France. So tomorrow morning, there's going to be a ceremony in France to begin the repatriation and the return of the remains of an unknown soldier belonging to the Royal Newfoundland Regiment to the city. So a few things. There's a pretty massive delegation over there between provincial government representatives, federal government representatives, members of the Legion, and others are in attendance. And it's well in excess of 100, I think. A few things. So there's been a few emails coming in saying, it's a pretty big waste of money, and why not just let the poor soldier rest in the sacred grounds with the rest of his fallen colleagues? Well, the fact of the matter is, this hasn't been driven by the province or the federal government. This has been pretty much the horsepower coming from the Legion. So there's several representatives of the Legion. One of the fellows quoted is an old Navy veteran, Frank Sullivan. And of course, he is one of those people that for years have been pushing for this to happen. And then for the renovation at the War Memorial and for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So I'm pretty sure if you look back through the history of this effort, it really does rest on the shoulders of the Legion. Of course, it needed support and funding coming from the federal and provincial governments, but that's really where this started. Then there's going to be some further, I think, consternation from some that the choice has been made, and you have to imagine this has been signed off in full by the members of the Legion, that the only flag draping the coffin will be the Canadian flag. questions will be posed as to whether or not it should be a Newfoundland flag or the Union Jack, of which the flag he would have fought under at the time. But that's a couple of questions that are flowing in. If you'd like to comment on it at all, you're more than welcome to do it. On that front, good job done by the folks in the newsroom here. If you are interested, so tomorrow evening at around 7:10, the flight arrives at St. John's International Airport. Shortly thereafter, they'll begin a motorcade. So there's a good breakdown. You know, they're asking for people to come out, if you are so inclined, to show your respect and support as they make their way in and around town. So there's a good breakdown right there on our website if you'd like to check it out. But of course, some of the notable spots, it'll be going down through Pleasantville, Kitty Vitty, where the training grounds would have been, and then of course past the War Memorial. So there's a really good motorcade breakdown put forward on our website. If you'd like to check it out and be part of that tomorrow, you can do exactly that. Okay, so saw yesterday as we were doing the show live that Bill Broderick, an industry veteran of the fishery for over 4 decades, has withdrawn from running for the presidency of the FFAW, leaving only 2, Abe Solberg and Dwan Street. You know, it's going to be pretty important. Like, even if you're not involved in the fishery, it's still going to be a vitally important industry in this province. Of course it is. Huge employers, both on the harvesting side and the processing side. So good luck to the 2 candidates that remain. But let's dig into some fisheries-related matters. Okay. So for some, this might be an eye-rolling conversation, and some may think that the issue surrounding seals is dead and buried. Not if you work in the industry, it's not. So no surprise that the Senate committee, who's chaired by Senator Fabian Manning, of course, from the Southern Shore, has brought forward a report about seals and some recommendations about what to do. So whether or not this is going to just end up in the dustbin or it's going to get any traction with the parliamentarians themselves remains to be seen. But it's the lack of actual scientific data. I mean, it's sort of galling, isn't it? You know, we can all, even if you've never been on the water, period, never dipped your toe in salt water, you know full well, if there's 7 or 8 million seals out there, it's having an incredible impact on the strength of various fishery stocks, whether it be cod or capelin or shrimp or whatever the case may be. What do you think they're eating? So they go on to say that they eat about 22 times more fish than are commercially harvested. I don't even know if that's 100% accurate, but you've got to believe it's in and around that ballpark. So there's a couple of novel things that have come forward. You know, they're demanding that Ottawa have some sort of strategy in place in the next 6 months. And Fabian Manning himself saying they're not calling for a call, they just want to open up some additional markets. Now, all through that, we've been down these roads many, many times in the past, and we'll see. So whether it be a focus on omega-3 oils from the seals themselves and or the pelts, and of course the world is hungry. So I don't think Senator Manning is wrong at all. But the political will to do something about this has been 100% absent. We can have seal meat days in the cafeteria on Parliament Hill. We can have people wearing the sealskin vest and their sealskin bow tie and all the rest of it. But until something changes on the political front, we're probably just going to continue to spin our wheels. I hope that's not the case. And again, for those of you who think the seal conversation is antiquated, out of date, irrelevant, again, it's not from folks working in the industry. So, one of the real novel things in this report and some of the recommendations made, and this one might have some impact. For instance, when you look at some of the media campaigns and the propaganda and the lies that are showing the sights of red blood on white ice and baby seals being taken, there hasn't been a baby seal taken since the 80s. So what Senator Manning and his colleagues are saying, they recommend that charities and nonprofits who spread misinformation about the seal hunt, that they lose their tax-free status. And of course, that would require a change to the Income Tax Act, but that's the hidden where it hurts, right? We know that once some of these visuals and commentary has been shared, it's seeped into organizations like the World Trade Organization. People have taken some of these out-and-out lies as gospel, and it's going to be hard to change their minds. But if you want to stop or stem the flow of this bogus information, then that would be exactly where to start. You would think that some of these notable groups, that if they thought they were going to lose their tax exemption, their tax-free status, then they would probably stall very quickly some of their campaigns. So that's the most interesting recommendation coming out of it. And again, if it's something you want to take on, we can do it. And again, Senator Manning says something that I think is absolutely on point. The seal industry has been easy pickings. It's just a low-hanging fruit, right? An easy target. When you look at the death or demise of a chicken or a pig or a cow inside those massive industries, you don't hear a whole lot from these types of groups, you know, peddling their money, their story to garner fundraising donations. So they don't take that on, they take this on. And it's had a big impact. And again, if it's of no concern to you, it's a concern to plenty. And it could indeed be a key linchpin in the recovery of various stocks. But interesting report. And Senator Manning, if you're listening, you're more than welcome to join us on the programme. A couple others on that front. So here comes angling season for salmon. And we know last year is probably going to be the rule, not the exception, regarding warm water temperatures in the rivers. And so then I think brings on probably a heightened focus on things that have been talked about for years, if not decades, is the whole concept of hook and release or catch and release. The key there is not only about how long you play the fish and taking it out of the water for the photos, but the real key will be the water temperatures. I think there's someone interested in calling on that front today, so I'm calling out to you anglers. You know, where do you stand on it? Because if the water temperatures in some of the rivers hit as high as 27 degrees versus the optimum 18 degrees, then the likelihood of that salmon dying after being released is heightened. So if you want to take it on, we can do exactly that. All right, what's this? Let's scribble. Oh, here we go. So we're all told, you know, to be wary of the scammers because they're lurking around every corner and they're really quite sophisticated. And then all the digitization of our personal information, whether it be at the government level or the corporate level. So the story coming from the west coast of the country is about London Drugs. London Drugs used to have stores here in this province as well, but no longer. So they have some 79 stores across Western Canada. And on April 28th, they were hacked. As a result, they closed every one of their stores and didn't reopen until May the 7th. Now London Drugs is disclosing the fact that some of the hacked information is being released. Most of it apparently about employee information, as opposed to some of their customer databases that were compromised, but have not, at this moment in time, been shared. So where we're going with this is, like London Drugs, they refuse to pay the ransom. And we don't really know what happened in this province regarding the hack of our Meditech system. But with all of the moves by provincial governments, the federal government, to put everything online, I mean, counter service is pretty much gone for all intents and purposes. And so everything, of course, even in this company, you know, all my records are digitized. That's the way of the world. But you wonder just how aggressive some of these hackers are and how successful we are in protecting ourselves. Whether it be our own personal information with our own accord, and or the company you work for or the governments that you live under. That's an interesting way to put that. On top of that, you know, I also think there's someone interested in calling about defense spending today, and fair enough, we can do that. If one of the prime risks that we face is online, and it's not just about my banking information or otherwise, it's things like the electrical grid, pipelines, water supplies. I mean, that's where we really can be compromised and hit where it hurts right here at home, as opposed to some of the conflicts around the world, of course, which we are involved in. We have active forces in Latvia at this moment in time. So is it time, when we talk about, like the Americans are all over us about defense spending, as are many of our allies inside of NATO, about living up to our floor of 2% of defense spending, which we're nowhere near. Not even the Conservatives have committed to spending 2% of GDP on defense. But how and why are we not including cyber defense as a part of defense? Because in reality, for Canadians living and working on Canadian soil, that's one of the biggest risks we face. Of course, I'm members of the military, and we can talk about their underfunding and some of the scary stories we hear inside the Canadian Armed Forces, but that whole hack of London Drugs, it's just a matter of time before it makes its way back to the province. What do you think? Right, had an interesting conversation with Alexis Foster, who's the CEO of the Canadian Home Builders Association, yesterday here on the program. And it's an excellent idea. So when governments are telling us they're all about protecting us as consumers, and we just mentioned our personal information, is the concept of a contractor registry. I mean, how many times have you in your own social circles heard from your friends or your family that they were left in a lurch by a jobber, a fly-by-night contracting company to do whatever type of job? So if we had a registry with insured and accredited contractors with viable reputations, then that would make it better for us as a consumer. It really, truly would. It would probably make it better for everyone in the contracting business, because when people get duped, it just gives a black eye to the industry. In addition to that, they've already been lobbying municipalities to talk about if that registry was in place, and it was in some form during the provincial rebate program, which was it was attractive and a lot of people took advantage of it, so they already started the registry. A lot of the groundwork has been done. So if you've ever been so-called left in a lurch or ripped off and or shoddy work done, whether it be completion of a new home or renovations to your home, this to me sounds like a really good idea. We also talked about the whole concept of 10,000 home starts per year. The record ever in this province is 2,500. So we've got to get back to some reality, because if we're going to use 10,000 as the benchmark as to whether or not we're getting where we need to be, well, we're just going to fall woefully short. So you want to talk about anything in the whole concept of the housing issue from any angle, I'm into it. And one angle, I believe we're going to be speaking with Doug Pawson from End Homelessness St. John's. They've been tapped to manage the affairs and the operations of, 106 Airport Road, the former Comfort Inn. Okay. So apparently there's 11 people there, 10 staff on site, and very little in the way of support. We're told by a couple of the residents that they thought they were going to get X and they've gotten less. So hopefully Mr. Parsons is able to join us this morning, because there's a lot to it. Last one before we get to you, or maybe not the last one. So there's a story out in Spaniards Bay at Holy Redeemer School where there was a chemical smell and they were told to shut down the school immediately. Now the students will get back into other schools next week, which is good news. And we're not exactly sure of the source or what needs to be done to remedy the situation. But to take it in broad strokes, and I know air filtration won't deal with some things like chemical issues necessarily, or ammonia or whatever the case may be, but it's sort of been lost in the conversation. We got so wrapped up in public health measures, of which many of them were very fundamental. Wash your hands, cover your coughs and sneezes, da-da-da-da-da. But air quality and what it means for the amount of time people miss at work and or school is very real. And it's something that, precedes the pandemic. So we get focused in on a lot of pandemic-related matters, but air quality has long been a concern. We don't talk about it much. We had a sole source contract to put air purification units in the classrooms across the province, but has anything else changed on that front? And again, this doesn't have to be about COVID. This can be about anything. I mean, just think about how quality the air is inside the fuselage of an aircraft with the HEPA air filter systems. But we haven't made much in the way of headway in public buildings. And, we have an HVAC system here in this building, and I think the air quality is pretty good. But we've kind of just stalled any of those moves. People just got fed up and exhausted by public health-related matters. And so, consequently, regardless of the prevalence of COVID or anything else in society, that people are just sort of, will you leave me alone about that stuff? But something fundamental that can be a standalone measure for our overall health well-being is to have a real keen focus on air quality and the proper systems to be installed. And again, that doesn't have to have anything to do with COVID. It just has everything to do with overall air quality and our health. Oh, just popped in my head. When we were talking about the fishery there, so there's a recent report came out about the impact of aquaculture, in particular on Conn River and salmon returns. And of course, industry doesn't think that it's accurate and or fair, and no new science has conducted, but they're making the number one concern regarding the reduction or the fewer salmon returning in Conn River. They say the problem is because of the aquaculture industry. Interestingly, in this province and on the east coast of Canada, of course, the feds and the provinces approach aquaculture, open pen farming in the bay, vastly different than on the west coast of the country. Now, all of a sudden, it's popped up again inside the Liberal cabinet. Current Fisheries Minister Diane Laboutier is actually proposing renewing salmon farming licenses in British Columbia. People in British Columbia, I don't think, are too pleased, and certainly some of what they might refer to as eco-activist ministers are vocally displeased and real open clashes with the federal fisheries minister. But they managed to get the FO to disallow open pen farming in British Columbia, and now, of all people, the fisheries minister talking about bringing it back. Anyway, you want to take it on? Let's do it. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Our email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Elaine Dunphy's going to kick it off. She's belonged to Ageless Grace on the Rock. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin this morning on line number 2. So good morning to the owner of Ageless Grace on the Rock. That's Eileen Dunphy. Good morning, Eileen. You're on the air.
Oh, good morning, and it's Elaine, actually.
Oh, it's Elaine. My apologies. It says Eileen on my screen. My apologies once again. Good morning, Elaine. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. How are you doing today?
I'm grand. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Good.
Terrific. Let's talk about Ageless Grace. One of your colleagues sent me an email saying that we should really be talking about this and, unlock the power of neuroplasticity. What does Ageless Grace on the Rock do? Who are you?
I am, so I'm a retired a person who started a small business, and I actually run two. So Nia on the Rock and then Ageless Grace on the Rock is a brain health fitness program. And I started teaching that one December 2020. So I've been having an absolute ball working with primarily seniors in and around town and teaching them the beauty of ageless grace.
So inside the world of brain fitness, we hear people talking about it all the time, and we're talking about, the forecasted numbers regarding Alzheimer's, dementia, and otherwise. And of course, people want to be sharp as much as possible, as long as life as they possibly can. So what's different about Ageless Grace when we talk about mental acuity or brain fitness?
So the difference, I guess, with this one is it is a seated program. So it gives access to people who may have mobility issues. Everyone stays in a chair, so you've got that kind of community connection. And it's a series of 21 exercise tools that are simple to do. They have really easy names. Like, as an example, one of them would be called Spaghetti Spine. So you know that what we're going to be doing during that time, we're going to play a piece of music, we're going to activate ways to keep our spine mobile, and the whole time we're doing it, we're having a little bit of fun. We're listening to music that I pick that is specific to, say, the age group that I'm working with. So lots of times they're singing to me, so we're having a ball.
So I'm sure maybe I got ahead of myself here, but what's the intended goal? It's one thing to have fun, but it must have some pragmatic hopes attached to on top of having fun.
It absolutely does. So these 21 exercise tools, they are specifically formulated to activate the 5 main functions of the brain. And so there's an acronym for that. We call it SMAC, which we say is the sound of a new neural pathway firing. And so the acronym stands for strategic planning, memory and recall, analytical thinking, creativity and imagination, and kinesthetic learning. So every one of these 21 exercise tools stimulate the 5 main functions of the brain. So you're not just there to have fun. You're there to try and do something that maybe you've forgotten how to do. Like, we may sit in a chair and we'll do gentle geometry. So I'll coach them through and say, okay, with our right hand, we're going to draw little circles. And with our left foot, we're going to keep everything going and draw a triangle with your left foot. And then with your left hand, you're going to do a little strike through. It's not about being able to, ace how to do those exercises. It's trying something that your brain likes, that you're trying to fire that new pathway. Right?
Yeah, it's like rubbing your belly and patting your head.
It's exactly what it is.
So what's the documentation look like, or the research look like, in the ability to actually improve your memory? Because I think for many, you'll hear these comments all the time. As I get older, my memory fades. I have a hard time recalling things, whether it be short-term or long-term. So what does the research look like about the actual ability to improve your memory?
Well, with this program, was created by Denise Medved, and she is in the States, and so she's done huge amounts of investigative, this has been her baby for a very long time. And so it's the process says if you do 10 minutes a day of Ageless Grace by using one of those or a couple of the 21 exercise tools, you're going to start forming a new neural pathway. So it kind of proves that you can teach an old dog new tricks if you try something. And the benefit is in the trying. So it's never about, I've got to be able to ace this or anything. Your brain likes that you're trying it. So we do a lot of things that, we work on right brain, left brain activation. And I think what's happened because of COVID and then people not being able to be together, just getting people together in a community and having that little bit of joyful, fun music, doing something a little different. I think that's what the draw of Ageless Grace is.
You mentioned some of those physical exercises, and this is probably outside of your scope of interest, but, even some things that we did when I was a child versus today's generation, something as fundamental as cursive writing, which I kind of went down that rabbit rabbit hole a few weeks ago talking about cognitive abilities, creative thinking, strategic thinking, analytical thinking associated with cursive writing. And then in addition to, brain exercises for memory and recall and kinesthetic learning, it's also very fundamental things that you talk about, whether it be a little bit of physical activity and issues regarding your, whether it be meditation or fish supplements or sleep and practicing mindfulness and eating less sugar. There's so many things on top of brain exercises that really have a direct impact on your memory.
Absolutely, and then you mentioned your cursive writing, and so it's a dying thing. So one of the exercise tools is called Spelling Bee. So what we'll do is pick a word. I'm all about trying to help people find joy. So you would use, say, your right hand, and in the air with cursive writing, you would spell the word joy. Okay. And then we'll switch it to the left side and spell it backwards. And so you're activating those 5 main functions of the brain. Everyone, I always say to people, if you look silly and you feel silly, it means you're doing it perfectly right. And so we take a body part, we try and spell this word backwards and forwards. So what you're doing is you're challenging your brain to try something you haven't done for quite a while.
Yeah, and when I was reading about the cursive writing related matter, because if you just think about it, the ability to learn how to spell and form sentences when you have the pen, it feels different to write a P than it does to tap P on your keyboard, because every key feels the same versus every letter is different when you try to write them. When I further read about it, they were talking about, for folks, especially where they were talking about people who were getting up in age, is if you like to do puzzles, don't do them on your iPad, do them in a puzzle book, because it has a different relation to your brain activity, and how you get stimulated. So it's all very interesting if you think about it out loud. What do you need people to know about how they can get involved in this, and maybe just to find out some preliminary information? Because some people are not all about social butterfly, and maybe this is not something they might think of doing in a group. So how do you ease that worried mind?
Well, I like to say to them that I always create a safe space where people can come and explore something new, but also that they could check me out on Facebook. I'm Ageless Grace on the Rock, or send me an email at agelessgraceontherock@gmail.com and have a conversation with me and come try a class and see if it feels good for them.
How many people are currently involved?
I work in the run of a week. I'm in front of about 100 to 120. I call my seniors my welderlies. So we sit for an hour-long class, and we fire new neural pathways together. And, I'm hoping some of your listeners might join us for a class.
Yeah, let's hope so. Because of what I do for a living, I try to be actively working on mindfulness and memory and recall, because once that starts to fade, so does my employment. Elaine, great to have you on the show. Appreciate your time.
Thanks very much for having me. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
That's Elaine Dunphy, Ageless Grace on the Rock. That might be something of interest to many of the listeners here this morning. And I'm not trying to make it straight up about things like dementia and Alzheimer's, because we've talked about that and some of the forecasted numbers. But keeping your brain active is obviously important to everyone listening to the program. And when we talk about school-age children, I'm going to keep going back to that every now and then, because if you just take the time after the show to just Google up the benefits of cursive writing, and you'll come to up-teen articles, and they are very definitively coming to the same conclusions. It's not only a lost art, but people are having a hard time trying to trigger a brain, because screen time, of course, is a problem on a variety of fronts. We can take it on. But if you just think about it, learn how to spell by putting the letters together with a pen or a pencil on a piece of paper versus sitting down and typing them, because to write P-A-D-D-Y feels a lot different in my hand and in my brain and with my motor skills than versus going to the keyboard and P-A-D-D-Y. Everything feels the same. And then you add to it, someone made this point last time we talked about it, is how many younger people do you know that can't read an analog clock? Can't tell time on a clock? They have to have a digital clock in front of them, which is also sort of interesting. Let's take a break. When we come back, Doug Pawson, he's with the End Homelessness Group, tapped to direct the operations at the Comfort Inn on Airport Road. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 1. Say good morning to the Executive Director at End Homelessness St. John's. So that's Doug Pawson. Good morning, Doug. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, sir. How about you?
Good. A bit under the weather this week, but on the mend.
Fair enough. I wish you speedy recovery. So let's get into it. The Comfort Inn, your organisation has been tapped to direct the operations at this transition house. Now, we've heard from a couple of residents saying they were told they'd get X kind of support, and up until now, they're not getting it. I think there's only 11 people there, or as of Tuesday, there was 11 there, and 10 staff on site. What are the 10 staff? Give us the breakdown.
Yeah, so we've been, since we last chatted, and at this time last month in mid-April, we had just signed the agreement, like you mentioned, to operate the hotel. And from that time, we've been able to hire a number of core staff, like our leadership team, a site director, 2 managers, several floor coordinators that provide ongoing support. So we've been able to hire folks, and in a really tough labor market, we've been able to bring on a number of new staff within 4 to 6 weeks of signing that agreement. So we've been onboarding last week and this week and into next, and that's part of our phased approach. And the individuals that are there now had been there prior to us signing on as operator under the shelter placement. And so our staff have been working with those folks to identify what they want, if they want to continue, and they have choice in staying and continuing on. So our team is doing a great job. I'm really pleased that we've been able to hire such a great core staff with lots of experience in the sector so quickly. It's been a really great experience bringing those folks on, and that's part of our phased approach that we've committed to.
So if there's 10 staff on site and 11 residents at this moment in time, what would a full complement of staff look like when all 100 rooms are occupied?
Oh, we're talking, with full-time, part-time relief staff, well over 60 staff as our model would indicate. And that's because we want to provide 24/7 staffing support. So our staff, along with, health, Newfoundland Labrador Health Services staff and security on site, and then the hotel staff that are there as well. There's going to be a lot of staff, a lot of supports available for folks once it's fully operational.
Okay. There was a story in the media this week about the cost and the difficulty with finding housing for people with complex needs. And they talk about private landlords and some of the 3 lines of subsidy dollars that go out the door. When we talk about eligibility criteria or vetting for who will be residents at the Comfort Inn, would people that fall into that category of complex needs, would they be at somewhere near the top of the list? Or how do you find who's best eligible, best suited for a spot in that hotel?
Yeah, great question, Patty. And this has been the commitment that we've been running called Coordinated Access, working with our community partners to support folks. So they'll do a triaging process to make sure folks who need additional levels of support and who need that at that location will have access to that. So there's already a prioritization system in our community. It's been working for other supported housing initiatives as well. And so we lean on that. We lean on our community partners. We have a joint intake process with health and NL Housing. And the eligibility criteria is basically for those individuals who are known to the shelter system. So that those are folks that we can say have experiences of homelessness and need additional levels of support. And we're prioritizing those folks who have chronic histories of homelessness. So that just means people with prolonged 6 months out of the last 12 months or 18 months out of the last 36 of known homelessness. Because we know as folks become chronically homeless, their level of support from a health and housing need are far more substantial. So that's really how we've designed the eligibility criteria, and of course the joint intake process working with our existing coordinated access system.
What does it look like on site? Like, one of the complaints you hear from folks who are avoiding the shelter system as we know it is that, if they have a drug addiction issue, they're surrounded by people who are taking drugs. If they have an alcohol-related issue, same thing. Maybe the prevalence of physical or sexual violence. So what does consumption look like on site? Are people allowed to drink or to do drugs?
Well, we've always maintained a harm reduction approach to this work, right? So if folks are going there with a substance use a disorder, then we'll work with them to make sure that if they are using, that it's done in a safe way and that it's done in a secure way. Again, harm reduction isn't trying to enable folks. It's to help them reduce their dependence on substances. And hopefully with stable housing, the reasons that you might turn to substances to cope with the trauma that you've experienced by experiencing homelessness can be reduced. So that's the harm reduction approach we're taking. And if folks need to use, then we want to make sure that it's done in a safe and secure way.
What does that mean? Let's say, for instance, someone has...
We can provide supplies. Yeah, it would just mean that if folks need safe supplies, that they could avail of those, and that they would have a plan in place. So if they wanted to use substances, that they would they could identify where that could take place, and a way to check in on folks. And of course, that's done through a medically managed approach. So, there's a lot of criteria around how that can be supported, but it's done in a safe and a secure way.
And how does that co-opt with the treatment of their addiction? Because, there's a big controversy across the country talking about safe supply and safe injection sites and those types of things. And on some parts of the political spectrum say, we're just enabling people. It's as simple as that, as opposed to trying to get them off of the drug. So talk about the process, because if it's just about safe supply and or clean needles or what have you, how does that coexist with some addiction treatment, so that hopefully, if they're going to actually transition, get back on their feet and back into the workforce, and keeping the wolf away from the door via their own accord, how does it work together?
Yeah, I'll take it one step back before I get to that, I think. And this kind of came out in one of the consultations that we did with the residents in Airport Heights is, people often turn to substances to cope with trauma. And I don't know about you, Patty, but if I have a few days where I'm not sleeping well, I get run down, I get sick. If I don't know where I'm going to put my head the next day, that's a real stress on the body. So people turn to substances for all types of stressors. And if you're experiencing homelessness, that's a big stress. And people may turn to substances to help cope with that. People do that as well because they can't access mental health supports and appropriate medication. So they turn to substances to help manage their mental health. So there's reasons why people use substances. The point that I think what I really want to emphasize is that if people are using substances and they want supports with their substance use, that there is a mental health and addiction support on site through NL Health Services. They've committed to providing those resources. And we want to make sure that if folks are identifying that they want to reduce their substance use, that there's a plan with those health practitioners to do that in a safe way. And cold turkey, it doesn't work for most people. And so we have to respect that. But it just means safe supply means that individuals have safe ways of using a substance, if that's what they need, or a plan for their safety with staff in place. So we got to unpack why people use substances in these situations to understand how you move forward as well. So if people are working towards reducing substance use, that's exactly what we want to see as part of this transition housing initiative.
I'm not trying to overlap these two, but things like the Employment Stabilization Program, 170 people that were on social assistance signed up, 40 of them 11 months later, back on their feet, no longer availing of social assistance, working for a living. Are these types of programs going to be part? Because we have, quote unquote, a captive audience here. And, it's one thing to deal with your mental health related matters and or addictions and the whole concept of homelessness, period. But in the aim to transition, are these types of programs, whether it be high school equivalency or employment stabilization, is that going to be offered, to the people living in the Comfort Inn?
Well, we certainly want to make sure that there's space, and there will be space for community-led programming, resident-led programming. I couldn't imagine why we wouldn't want to support people if they have, employment goals, whether it's connecting them on site or to a service provider that provides those services. We want to make sure that space is welcoming for community. And a good connection point, and that's, again, coordinated access, is making sure that if folks need something, that we can support their goals. So if it's not on site, the connection to the community organizations that provide it will be certainly made available.
Last one. So I'm big on this when we talk about any governmental approach is, we have to set forward what our goals are and then how we can measure our progress and or successes. Have you and your group sat down and done that? Like when you have a full complement of staff and all 100 rooms are occupied, how are we going to know if we're actually on the right track? Is it going to be a measure of people that have actually transitioned into a healthier life and a gainful, meaningful employment? Or how are we going to, constitute success?
Well, and great question, Patty. Evaluation is really important for the work that we're doing. Despite the comments in the House this week, we don't evaluate the success or not of this initiative before we're operational. But we have been working with NL Health Services and community to determine what some of those key indicators would be. So folks who might come in and then find housing outside, more permanent, stable housing, that's a key indicator, of course. I think some of the bigger goals for me in this is that this is the beginning of the transformation of the shelter system and how we think about housing and homelessness, right? So I think for me, it's connecting people to housing. It's making sure that people have access to health supports. They know where to go and get them in the future as part of a system of care so that it's not only crisis or emergency driven, and that when folks are stable, they know where to go to access supports so that they don't find themselves in that cycle of homelessness. But we are working with the folks at NL Health Services, NL Housing, and our community to develop that more robust evaluation framework.
Appreciate your time this morning, Doug. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patty. I appreciate it.
Take good care.
Yeah, you too.
And good luck. Bye-bye. It's Doug Pawson, Executive Director and Homelessness St. John's. Let's get another one before the break. Line 3. John, you're on the air.
Good morning, and thank you very much for taking my call.
Happy to do it.
I just wanted to make a comment about the field parties little news blurb that was going on VOCM News earlier this morning. And I believe when I was listening here, one of the comments from the police was more or less, take your phone in case any problems arise. And I was kind of like, I had to listen to that news report one or two times because I sort of thought about, well, how about getting on as the police and saying, if you're caught participating here in some of these field party events, that you're going to be fined or charged. Like some people are at these parties who are, supplying liquor to people who are underage. They might be supplying drugs, etc. There needs to be, I think, not the approach of, take your phone in case anything happens. There's definitely going to be something happen at a field party. And I just want to talk about this from my past experience of living on a street that connected to one of these fields where these kinds of events took place frequently, and just mention some ideas for, I guess, either the police and parents to consider here. And I guess the first one is, of course, often there's a lot of underage drinking and drug use that takes place here. I mean, it's a perfect spot for dealers and that to pass out free samples, or while it might start there at a field party where you sitting down having a simple beer, your whole life could be affected if somebody slips something into that beer, especially in today's drugs. It's not like 30, 40 years ago when probably if somebody passed you weed or something at a field party, it was a considerably weakened drug compared to today's. Nowadays, somebody could be putting something like a roofie, a date rape drug, or a fentanyl or crack or something in your drink.
But of course, that could happen in the pub.
Your life.
That could happen in the pub.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily take a big field party.
Absolutely, and also with that, Patty, though, in a pub, the environment is controlled a tiny bit more. It sure. Certainly can happen in the club, but the population in the club is typically supposed to be over, a certain age group. They're supposed to be ID'd at the door. In a field party, there is nobody there that's necessarily, deciding what age person is there or who can attend. Mm-hmm. So I would throw that out there, and I say to parents, like, sit down and talk to your kids about this. The police comments. I understand that the police comment was basically, saying that having the phone is protection. If you're in trouble, call your parent. Absolutely, I agree with that. But realistically, we have to sit down with our kids here right now and say that in all likelihood, at these kind of parties, things often get out of hand. And if your kid is in the middle of something like that, they might not be able to call you once things are out of hand. You know what I mean? So you have to have that talk. And the goal should be not to attend. You know what I mean? They may have to set up consequences as a parent to say, if you attend and you're caught at this, there is a consequence. So lots of privilege. And the same with the police. If you attend, there may be a fine. There may be, if you're involved at a higher level, there may be some charges for the organization of this. So that's, I guess, my first comment on that piece right there. The other things that I'll mention here is you have to remember in today's world that sometimes a lot of your mistakes are captured on social media. Like, again, in our day, I made lots of mistakes as a kid, and everybody had to laugh for the 5 minutes, but there was no, 1,000-year record of it. It happened. Everybody had to laugh. Maybe next week everybody forgot about it. Nowadays, you could be involved in something that is a bit ridiculous or illegal or whatever, and that could be captured and posted, and consequently, again, have a tremendous impact on your life, your mental health. Like some kids, if some picture of them was posted doing something that they shouldn't be doing, they can be traumatized and greatly affect their well-being.
Yeah, and it doesn't take someone else to post it either. A lot of these are self-inflicted wounds. People posting their own images and videos, whether it be on TikTok or in Snapchat or wherever, and you don't think about it at the time. So in the celebratory mood, and you're consuming whatever, and things get carried away, and the next thing you know, you're talking about being admitted to a university or a job interview that goes sideways and they ask you to explain X, Y, or Z that you did when you were a teenager. Because you're right, it doesn't go away. The internet is forever.
Absolutely. I'll also say to you about, going the flip side, if you're a person living in one of those neighborhoods where these things are going on, there's frequently damage to the neighborhood itself, like garbage boxes overturned, lawns that got run over by vehicles, etc. There's garbage left in the woods, broken glass. If you're a person who likes to walk their pet in the wilderness or something, if you go through one of these areas that has undergone a field party, lots of times there's shards of glass everywhere. There's big burn pits. There's potential for forest fire while they're having those kind of events, especially if they're off the beaten trail, and it's difficult to get firefighting equipment to that easily. So again, sometimes it's, as a parent, you might be okay with this if it's not in your neighborhood, but it is in somebody's neighborhood. And I will tell you that, people in those neighborhoods where these things are going on, they're often forced to deal with people who are a bit belligerent, who might have been drinking, might be a little bit of reckless driving, trying to get in there or whatever. And, the neighborhood should not be having to really deal with that. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll give you the final thought because I do have to get going.
My final thought, just in my mind here right now, I just say maybe it's time, that the police maybe try to increase presence in known areas and set up maybe an anonymous tip line for field party locations. I think it's a little bit too much tolerance for some of this lawless kind of behavior. And I think that basically, if you have a little bit of fear of some of the fines and arrests, if police are posting that we'll be diligent in trying to do this, for some kids who are on the fence, that might be enough to turn them back. For other kids, if they go, they might they go there knowing, and parents go there knowing that they may be, involved with the police business.
Appreciate the time, John. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Let's take a very quick break. When we come back, Andrew Dooner is in the queue. He's a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. They've done a comprehensive study of the implication of artificial intelligence when we talk about economic development, productivity growth. Of course, we have a problem with productivity growth here in this country. Andrew Dooner, right after this. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to one of the partners at PricewaterhouseCoopers. That's Andrew Dooner. Good morning, Andrew. You're on the air.
Hi, Patty. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the time.
Happy to have you on the program. So this is a pretty comprehensive report of which I've read much of it. And you're looking at some 500 million job ads from 15 different countries, including this country. What were you looking for?
So, Patty, it's a great question. A lot of this work that we did started with one of the great privileges that we have as a firm is every year we go out and we talk to hundreds of CEOs around the world, and we call this our annual CEO survey. 2024 was no difference. And this year, one of the things that came top of mind was over 70% of the CEOs that we talked to told us that they fundamentally believe that artificial intelligence was going to change how companies deliver value and how they create value. And then 85% of those CEOs actually told us that they expected significant employee labor gains from or productivity gains from the deployment of artificial intelligence. So we really set out to try to understand how is artificial intelligence, even though it's very early days in terms of kind of entering into our collective consciousness, really impacting job markets, labor availability, different roles, what are we seeing in terms of those impacts? And so the study really captures what we've seen across 15 different countries. And as you highlighted, 500 million job ads that we looked at over time to really understand how is artificial intelligence impacting roles in countries and sectors.
It may be early days, but I mean, I read an interesting opinion piece in the National Post some while ago from Jim Balsillie. Talk about the new world of the economy is vastly different and changing every single day. You know, as opposed to simple job creation numbers as a measure, he's talking about data compilation and intellectual property being developed, and a lot of that may indeed coincide with the advent of artificial intelligence. So when you found out what it looks like in this country, how do we compare to, say, relatively similar countries? You know, I know different scope and size and population base, but the UK, the United States, or otherwise.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and the way I would characterize this is, one thing that struck us is the speed with which we see change occurring. And I think even just looking at some of the trend lines in the report, what we're seeing is, while we may not all feel it today, we're really seeing artificial intelligence starting to impact the growth of different job types across the economy, the productivity levels across different job types, and those impacts are very uneven. When I look at Canada and what we found, certainly a lot of the findings that we had here in the country mirror a lot of our headline findings from the US and the UK. So when you look at the rate at which artificial intelligence skills are being demanded by employers, they're increasing significantly. When you look at the growth rates of jobs that are highly impacted by artificial intelligence, so jobs where they have a large number of kind of capabilities or skills required that artificial intelligence could mimic, you're seeing slower growth in demand for those jobs, meaning that AI is starting to displace tasks. And we're also seeing in some of those areas for people who are have skills around developing artificial intelligence or kind of critical to the development of these models, we see significant wage premiums. So people are actually earning a much higher wage premium than some of their peers in other industries for those specialized AI skills. Now, the last point I'll make on this is we don't see those impacts being as pronounced in Canada as, for example, we would say in the US. So that idea of a wage premium, we see AI skilled developers getting a 25% wage premium relative to other roles in the US. In Canada, that number showed up in our report at 11%. So our workers aren't necessarily getting the same gains. What we believe is happening there, it's a function of the speed at which AI is being deployed. It's being deployed much faster in the U.S. than we're seeing in kind of companies and organizations and areas of Canada. So we think it's just a matter of catching up.
And, of course, that will lead to the concept of potential brain drain. When you look at productivity and premium for wages, all those things are pretty good for the folks who get those jobs, good for the CEOs and their stake and shareholders. But what does it mean for actual jobs and job creation? Because, when automation became the big part and big focus inside the industrial era, in manufacturing, what have you, it compromised jobs. It was good for the companies, but maybe not great for individuals. So how does AI work with productivity growth and premiums for wages and actual job creation?
And I think, Patty, you're hitting on the absolute question that all of us need to be asking, and that there needs to be an active dialogue between regulators, the public sector, corporations, and the workforce. Because what we're seeing is the impacts of AI are uneven across different job types, to your point. There are certain places where the productivity gains are clear and we are augmenting workers, but there are other places where we're seeing the skills that AI is able to bring to an organization are starting to displace tasks, which means we need to invest in retooling, retraining, re-equipping our workers to be successful going forward. So I think that there's a lot of conversations left to be had, but the question you've asked is exactly the one that we pose in the report, and one that we're working with a lot of our clients, both in the public and the private sector, to try to plan for and kind of what I would say secure an orderly transition to an economy that is more AI-powered.
Are we able to understand a breakdown? How do I set this up? So it's a very small world. The global economy is much more intrinsic. It's much more linked than it has been in the past. So with multinationals operating in the country and Canadian companies that have headquarters here but have tentacles around the world, and or me working for an American company from my kitchen table in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, are we able to understand the breakdown of what is the actual Canadian issue versus how we relate to the rest of the global economy?
Well, I think the way you set up the question is exactly what we need to be considering. The fact that, as a country, we've made choices over the last 100 years to be more interconnected, with the global economy, which means our workers are part of a global talent pool, right, where people are competing for access to the skills that Canadian workers have, and our organizations, our companies, often compete on a global scale. So while we need to manage what I would call the kind of the internal dynamics of making sure that AI is adopted across the labor force in a thoughtful, responsible way, we also have to be mindful that the companies that we compete with, the multinationals that we're part of, are looking to deploy this technology, gain efficiencies all around the world. And so we have to make sure that we're kind of measuring the pace of our activities to match with what we see being kind of the global realities of how other organizations and countries are moving faster than us.
The trends are clear, and they're going to be even further exacerbated in the years to come. In 2012, 6 in 1,000 job posts required AI skills. Just over 10 years later, 11 in 1,000 job posts required AI skills. So we're talking about significant change at breakneck pace, and it's only going to get quicker. Inside this report, it's one thing to talk about AI-related job postings, but did you also look at what we're talking about regarding AI risk? Because even the federal government, the most recent federal budget, $2.4 billion related to artificial intelligence, $2 billion of that going to the startup and the tech companies, and a paltry $50 million talking about associated risks. Do the CEOs talk about the risk as much as they talk about productivity?
So I think that is exactly where the conversations are going. And if I reflect on the conversations that we as a firm are having, that I'm talking to a number of my clients, CEOs and boards about, I think the discussion has moved beyond. We all agree that there is an opportunity for efficiency gains through the deployment of new technologies and new capabilities. And I think that is just the story of human progress. I think the discussion has evolved to a far more nuanced view to say, what's the appropriate way to strike the right balance between gaining efficiencies and ensuring nobody's left behind. So we do see a number of our clients having very active conversations about what's the right way to prepare ourselves for a future that's more AI-powered in a way that still engages our workforce, that makes sure that we're striking the right balance between efficiency and responsibility.
Because when we talk about AI, it's either fascinating or scary to talk about it being sentient, but then if you talk about new startup AI platforms, it can be biased algorithms, garbage in, garbage out. So it's not all, you can't believe everything you see simply because it came from, quote unquote, artificial intelligence. Good to have you on the show, Andrew. Appreciate your time.
I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.
It's Andrew Dooner. He's a partner at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Let's take a break for the news. When we come back, Courtney Clark is next in the queue. She's with Equal Voice. Talk about the upcoming campaign schools. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Say good morning to the Senior Manager of Education with Equal Voice. That's Courtney Clark. And good morning, Courtney. You're on the air.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you on the program. Let's talk campaign school. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So Equal Voice and Equal Voice NL are hosting a campaign school for women and gender diverse folks over the weekend. It is a 2-day event. You can come to one or both days. Tomorrow is the campaign school itself, where we're going to kick off the day with a campaign strategies panel with 3 experienced campaign managers. Then we're going to talk about things like forming your campaign team, key messages creation, canvassing for support, media and mass communications confidence, as well as fundraising and budgeting. And then Sunday, we're going to take all of that knowledge and everybody's ideas. We're going to put it to the test with a mock campaign simulation. We'll have 2 special guest judges who are elected leaders to give some good, honest feedback around the campaign strategies they've made. And ultimately, there'll be an elected winner.
So, there's a lot of moving parts. Some people might think from the outside looking in, I just put my name forward to be a candidate, then I try to round up some support. But between managing your finances after you do the fundraising, how complicated can it be for folks? Because I would imagine there's lots of well-intentioned, experienced people out there that they find the whole concept of running for political office, forget being elected and the toxic atmosphere that comes in the aftermath, is that they find it to be just so daunting they don't want to even give it a shot. So what's your message to folks, whether it be municipal level, provincial or federal?
Absolutely. So first off, the campaign school is for all 3 levels, municipal, provincial, federal. We go through all 3 in this course. And we really demystify that process because from the outside looking in, it can be daunting. You're looking at running like a mini pop-up business or a huge project management kind of situation when you're doing an election. So, you have to have your communication. You need to have things like graphic design and fundraising, but we break it down and show you the strategies to get the most votes and how to do it based on the kind of campaign you want to run, whether that's on a small budget, on a big budget, with a lot of volunteers, with a short amount of volunteers. And it's not just a campaign school for people considering running. It's also for those that might want to learn how to make their mark on someone else's else's campaign or just want to meet some like-minded people and get to know how that process works. But we try to break it down in a way that makes it doable, and you can walk away with some real tangible resources to help you basically make it to your own.
I don't know if this is something to discuss at campaign school, but politics can be a bit of a minefield. So it's one thing to be able to talk to your supporters and people who are like-minded, but how do you suggest people who want to be candidates deal with their detractors? Because that's where it becomes extremely difficult, whether it be with level-headedness or being calm or trying to engage in meaningful, reasonable, good faith debate, because that's what people are afraid of, I would think, by and large. It's easy enough to be in a room with people who are applauding you and supporting you, quite another when you have to knock on a door and someone is a detractor or is of the other political ideology, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. And that is something that we spend a lot of time on in the campaign school talking about. We go through around a dozen or so different kind of people that you'll meet behind the door and the kinds of ways that you can interact with them. You know, there's often a system that you will use from 1 through 4 based on how likely they'll vote for you. And whether it's a situation where if you're a part of a party and the person behind the door is upset with what your party did in the last term, or it's someone who's historically been part of an opposition party, you can still find common ground and consensus. You're not going to try and win them over, because canvassing for votes and knocking on the doors it's actually more about voter identification. There are other ways in which you do that more interpersonal connection building. So like everything, there's a strategy, and we'll go through all the different kinds of people you meet. But if it comes to things, say like harassment, like real threats to danger, you just disengage and walk away. We talk about the safety protocols, the way that you set up the volunteers who go out with you, and the rebuttals that you can have when you are faced with someone who may want to start a fight. You know, you don't see that. That's often the people's biggest worries, but I'd say 99 out of 100 doors, you're either going to get people who are excited to see you run, or they're apathetic.
Well, apathetic is probably a good word to encapsulate politics, period, these days. When we talk about the way people engage with politics and or politicians and voter turnout and those types of things. So it's an interesting word to toss into the mix. If someone is interested in participating, is there a cost? What does it entail?
Yeah, there is a cost. It's $25 a day, and it's mostly just to cover things like the food and honorariums. But we do offer financial assistance as well. So we don't want any barriers. We have travel subsidies. We have childcare subsidies. So if price is a factor, all they have to do is check that off in the application, and no questions asked, we'll still accept them. I
appreciate the time. Anything else you'd like to tell us this morning, Courtney, before we say goodbye?
Absolutely. You know, I just want to say there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, going back to apathy and disengagement. And what I will say is, you know, if you have ideas, if you think that the world can be better, don't get angry, get elected. And you can make a difference with the skills. You don't need to have fancy degrees, and you don't need to have fancy jobs and big networks and disposable income. You just need to know your why, and you need to have an idea. And when you have that why, you base your whole campaign off of that, and you will be successful.
Courtney, nice to have you on the show. Appreciate the time.
No worries. You can register at equalvoice.ca/NLCS.
Terrific. Stay in touch.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. It's Courtney Clark, the Senior Manager of Education with Equal Voice. Before we get to the break, let's go to line number 1 and say good morning to the Liberal Member of Parliament elected in and serving the folks of St. John South, Mount Pearl. He's Minister of Labour and Seniors. That's Seamus O'Regan. Minister O'Regan, you're on the air.
Paddy, good to talk to you. Just
welcome.
On the trail of the caribou.
Well, welcome to the show. Before we get into it, I'd like to strike a deal before we talk about what's going on in France. You know, because we're talking about a pretty solemn issue, can we broker a deal where next week you can come on and we can talk politics and the issues of the day, and we can talk about France and the remains of the unknown soldier coming home? How's that?
Done. It's been too long.
Done. So next week we'll dig into it full on. Right now, what's happening in France where you are?
Well, we're on the trail of the caribou, and we're heading right now to Beaumont-Hamel, and there will be a series of ceremonies there, but the big one will be tomorrow, when we will be taking the remains of the unknown soldier. There'll be a repatriation ceremony that will happen here, and then we will, on a military jet, we will be flying the unknown soldier's remains back home. We'll land in St. John's tomorrow evening. So we're all kind of girding ourselves for that. Yesterday we were on the trail of the caribou as well. We just came from Goudacourt, It's a good group of very committed people. Some people who have been working on this project for a long time, and to emphasize for people too, dealing with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and talking to them about the work that they do. This is a very rare thing where remains are exhumed from the place where that soldier fell and brought home as part of the unknown soldier ceremony. So this began, I think, with the Brits, their unknown soldiers, Westminster Abbey, going back to, I think, to 1920. Then the Americans have theirs, the Australians, New Zealand, Canada, only some, I think, 20 years ago, and now us, Newfoundland, of course, being its own country at the time. So this is a very solemn ceremony. It's a very rare ceremony, as I say. They leave the remains where the men fell. But in this case, we will follow in line with other Allied countries from the day, and we will bring our son home.
I was interested to watch the ceremony at Montreal-le-Preux. Of course, heavy losses for the Royal Newfoundland Regiment there, and of course the town never forgets, and they come out in pretty strong numbers, remembering the importance and the impact and the contributions of the members of the Royal Newfoundland Regiment. In the First World War, some 12,000 people from this province served in various capacities, 1,700 killed, yes, 800 of no known grave. How did the process work to land on this particular grave, these particular remains to be chosen to be repatriated? Do you know?
No, and it's Dad used to always say when I was when we were young, we'd say, why is this and why is that in relation to religion or the church? And Dad would say, we're Catholic, boy, you got to believe in mysteries. In this case, mystery is a good thing. So no, we don't know, and they are. It's fascinating, Patty, to talk to them about the work that they do. Unfortunately, looters are still a big thing here. So, they have to be very careful about remains when they discover new remains. The work that they do is very, very secretive. In fact, the group that we met with, if there's construction being done or a farmer finds remains or whatever, they have to be there within 2 hours, and they have to find and recover those remains before nightfall, or they may lose them because of looting. In the case of this project, they want to, they do their best to make sure that remains a mystery, because the mystique of it is that these remains represent all those who remain missing. For lack of a better word. So there's some mystery that's shrouded in it, but there's a lot of science and a lot of good people who are behind it from Veterans Affairs Canada, but from all over the world who are situated here and who do that work, because there are still thousands, tens of thousands who remain missing.
I know the driving force behind this are members of Veterans Affairs Canada, but certainly the members of the Royal Canadian Legion. Have they been given the opportunity to sign off on all of these types of ceremonies, what's done, who speaks, and, for instance, something interesting, that the one flag that will drape the coffin will be the Canadian flag. I've even had questions from people saying, why isn't it the Newfoundland flag? Why isn't it the Union Jack, the flag which they would have fought under then? So has the Legion been given the sign-off authority on those types of things? Because I think that would be important.
Indeed.
Because lots of controversial things can happen here when we have, large political delegations in play.
No, and look, we made sure from our end that people like Berkeley Lawrence, Frank Sullivan, that they were included from the get-go, that they have been part of the Newfoundland War Memorial Centennial Project Committee, and that they are here with us. So in fact, and this is interesting, it wasn't the Union Jack that they fought under; it was the Red Ensign. So the Union Jack is in the corner, of course. But this is right. This is the Newfoundland Red Ensign. So in the ceremonies that take place today and tomorrow, the Red Ensign will be flying, and that Red Ensign will be folded and placed on the coffin of the unknown soldier, and will follow the unknown soldier as he is repatriated and brought home. So that is something that we have worked with the Legion on, both for its historical accuracy and because it's the right thing to do. I mean, that's just respectful of who we were and who we are.
I'm not sure how to put this, but enjoy the rest of the experience. And for many, I would assume it would be overwhelming. I heard Frank Sullivan quoted, pretty emotional when being in on the Trail of the Caribou and all these various ceremonies. So I guess the right thing is to enjoy the experience. And I look forward to talking next week, where we will dig into the issues of the day.
Yeah, I would just end with, for those few who have been fortunate enough to go to Beaumont Hamel, I think what is most striking and very emotional for people are the last names. Place names and surnames, family names are very important to Newfoundlanders. And when you see the accumulation of names that you know, from people that you know, families that you know, it sticks you in the gut. It really does. But I'm very proud of the people who have been involved in this project, and I think many Newfoundlanders and Labradorians will be moved when we're able to bring our son home.
I appreciate your time, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Paddy. Talk next week.
Look forward to it. Thanks. Bye-bye. That's Minister Seamus O'Regan. And look, you know that there are tons of things we need to discuss with elected officials from all sides of the political spectrum. And without question, next week, and you heard me offer the invitation and he accepted it to come on next week, where we will dig into the politics of it all. But I just kind of had a funny feeling in my stomach that to dig too far into that while we're talking about the repatriation of remains of an unknown soldier. So hopefully that's a decision that I made that you will agree with. But next week, make no bones about it. That's poor choice of words. Make no mistake, we will dig into politics with the Minister next week. Let's take a break. Don't go away. And welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Tom, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay, sir. How about you?
Oh, doing good. No, I was listening to your caller yesterday morning throwing a bouquet out to the snowplows, and that I think he was from the Bay Roberts area. I don't know if you recall that.
I do.
That phone call. Yeah. Well, I want to do the same, not with snowplows, but with the cancer clinic. I was going back and forth there for chemotherapy treatments for 6 months, and I was treated extremely, and I stress that, extremely well. Right from the time I walked in the door until I gave my slip to where I was going. Even the girls on the desk, if I wasn't sure, they walked me down over the stairs. They took me right to the department I had to go. And the same with the girls downstairs in the blood work for the cancer clinic. They were phenomenal. I was overwhelmed with the kindness that I received there.
I'm really glad to hear that. And, that type of bedside manner and compassion and professionalism goes a long way to easing the worried mind of someone going through that stage of life, going through that clinic in the first place. It could be really quite scary, and of course it is, but when you get treated like that, it just makes it a little bit more manageable, I would assume.
Yes, and Paddy, and that's the main reason for my call, to assure people that is going through cancer treatments that is not what you think it might be. It's, to be honest, it's almost like a family setting. Now, that's how good it was. And the nurses, they almost run when you ask for some kind of favor or whatever. And they were always there. I had a couple of reactions throughout the treatments, and it was so fast. Just as I pressed the buzzer, that I was having a reaction. They were there with the fixers, for the lack of a better term. And, I was very, very impressed, I have to say. And a couple of times before I was diagnosed with cancer, I was over to Emerge. I started off with a pain in the stomach. And it was the same way over there, over to St. Clair's I went. And I got seen right away. I wasn't, waiting 8 and 10 hours like I hear some callers say. Got in right away and got x-rays done right away, and I had a scan done right away. The doctor came back, told me the news, and I said, okay, I'll call my wife to come pick me up. No, you're not going home. This is an emergency surgery. So anyway, that's enough about that part. But the bouquet is the important thing, and I stress that anyone going in to that cancer clinic, they're going to be glad they did. It's a very, very nice environment.
I'm glad that was your experience, Tom, and I'll offer my bouquet to those workers that you interacted with as well, and I wish you nothing but the best of health in the future. Anything else you'd like to say this morning, sir?
Yes, I would. And there's not only the nurses and the doctors and the oncologists. It's the volunteers going around with the little treats at coffee time, and the cleaners. It's all one big team, in my view.
Of course, they all have to work hand in hand, because if you have someone who's whatever kind of staff member, if they're not all on the same page with that compassion and solid bedside manner, that it can interrupt the flow and the positivity of the entire clinic. So 100% it's the entire team. Tom, I appreciate your time, sir. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, just like to say that without those cleaners and those volunteers, the system can't work, in my opinion. And that's all I have to say, Paddy.
I appreciate your time. I wish you well.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome, Tom. Take good care.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Let's get back on track with the break. So when we come back, the CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro is Jennifer Williams. She's next in the queue. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the CEO of Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro. That's Jennifer Williams. Good morning, Jennifer. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How about you?
I'm well, thank you.
I have about an hour's worth of stuff, so let's get going here. And I'm not going to keep you an hour. So inside this newly announced rate mitigation, which I just think is about the finalization of the package versus anything new that came to light. Now, it's good for the ratepayer, but of course, the money has to come from somewhere. We're talking about $2 billion over the course of 6 years. So first question is this money all coming from revenue streams at Newfoundland Labrador Hydro, whether it be deferred dividends and general revenues, or where's the money coming from?
Mm-hmm. So thanks for the question. Yes, it is about finalization, as you mentioned, because previously announced would have been the restructuring and the methodologies with the federal government. So that was sort of, okay, where do we get the funds? And then now we've been working on how do we allocate that so that rates indeed are mitigated from doubling. So it is about finalizing it, as you noted. And the way I described it last week, I thought it might be helpful here now, is the total cost that has to be mitigated is really coming from 3 streams. Less than 10% in year one is coming from customer rates, even with the 2.5% for July 1st. There's another portion, about, say, $150 million, would be coming from federal government sources that we've negotiated with them in the last couple of years. The remainder is coming from Newfoundland Labrador Hydro's operations and / dividends. So that's essentially where that remaining component is coming from.
How did yourselves and the government land on 6 years? Is there a rationale behind that? Because, the question was asked of Minister Parsons, what happens after 6 years? So why 6?
I think 6 would have been partially to do with a vision of a general rate application time frame. So if you think about how we would, envision a rate application after now, so it would take us close to a year to get the application together after this point in time. That would put us into 2025. It often takes 1 to 2 years for that to go through process with our regulator. So that would put us into, 26, 27, and then you would have a few more years of stable rates arising from that. So that would be certainly a component of the time frame that we would have chosen.
Okay, a few things. So are we considering not only the finalization of this rate mitigation package, but are we calling Muskrat Falls a completed, finalized, sanctioned project? It's ready to go, all the required testing? Because I don't think we've done the 900 megawatt test over the Labrador Island Link. So are you calling this completed?
You'll recall in April of 2023, the project was commissioned, and it was commissioned from the perspective of all of the agreements that had been signed. The 900 megawatt test is one that the federal government really certainly wants us to do as part of the basis of design. But the example I've been using to try to help folks understand is everybody has a speedometer. If you have a car, you have a speedometer in your car, and some of them will go to 200 kilometers an hour. You generally don't drive it to 200 kilometers an hour. Some people go way too fast, as the police would often see, but you're driving it, on the highway, maybe 100. But your car can go to 200 because it's been tested to do that. And so that's basically what the 900 megawatt test is. There's nothing different in our system for the 900 megawatt test than is already on it that we tested successfully, and therefore was commissioned at the 700 megawatt level. But it is a test that can be done just to prove it. So there's no new thing that we're testing. It is just one of the things that the federal government wanted us to make sure we did do as a result of the basis of design. And as we've discussed before, we need a very, very cold day to do that test, and so that can only be done in the winter. So we'll aim to do that late this year. But it doesn't change at all the fact that the project is indeed finished.
Is there a cost update?
There is no cost update because when it was commissioned, that was the final cost update.
Okay. So many people will say Muskrat Falls is as much a transmission project as it is a hydro dam. And there's a lot of money spent on the transmission issues, including the Maritime Link. Of course, that was funded by Emera, Nova Scotia Power. $1.5 billion came in on budget, came in on schedule. But my understanding is earlier this week, there was zero power flowing across the Maritime Link. Is that the case? And if so, why?
No, actually, so from America, that could be for a host of different reasons. I know, for example, there was a trip on the Nova Scotia end earlier this week, unrelated to our system at all. So it is not abnormal that you would have trips for a whole host of reasons that would occur on any component of your system. With regards to deliveries to Nova Scotia, I don't have the number in front of me. I would suggest we're running probably an average of close to 400 megawatts over there, and we're just about caught up on the under deliveries, and we'll finish that in June, save for a teeny tiny amount that has to be delivered next winter. That's Nova Scotia's choice. So it's not accurate that there's any big gap in deliveries to Nova Scotia. It's actually running very frequently, all the time, very high deliveries. So
400 megawatts represents 80% of capacity?
No, again, it's not about the capacity. It's the choice. So you can choose to run it as much as what your system demands. So it doesn't, just because it's running at any point in time at a certain level, is not relevant to its ability to run at a certain level. But the line is a 500 megawatt line to Nova Scotia, but that is irrelevant to how much Nova Scotia would choose to receive at any point in time.
Yeah, I was just trying to remind myself of the capacity being 500 megawatts. That's all I meant by that. Okay. Let's go to Muskrat Falls, the site itself. There was concerns with one of the 4 turbines, and then there was the thought that the same issue might plague another turbine. What's the status of that one that we know has a problem and the others?
And I think we may have talked about this before, but it is certainly helpful for folks to be reminded, is it was Unit 2, and it had a vibration at a certain power level. And we have that on other units in our fleet as well. And what you generally do is you make sure you don't run at that power level, and that's fine. It doesn't impact the running of your system overall. So, for example, the Muskrat Falls plant itself has had less than 1% of it being unavailable through the course of the year, and that compares to 5% unavailable in Canada. So it is an incredibly reliable plant. So this vibration at a certain amount, certain power level at that one unit has not affected our ability to run and supply power at all. But the intention is, from a long-term perspective, where this is a 50, 60, 80-year asset, 100-year asset, we intend to address that vibration issue. We could delay that if you wanted to until a year or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road, and it still wouldn't affect the reliability. But we are choosing to address that vibration issue later this year. And we aren't seeing any indication of the similar vibration issue in any of the other 3 units.
So if that means, and you say that Muskrat, the site itself, the plant is really reliable, reliability still remains a concern. There's been a couple of issues, whether it be just outside of Terra Nova and parts of southern Labrador, where we've had issues with the towers, weather-related matters. And I know we went from the turnbuckles to something to control the jumper-up effect. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But, Liberty Consulting was telling us that there could be prolonged blackouts or brownouts, 45 days, 60 days. We know it took a long time to plow the roads to even get into the towers that were damaged or the wires that were damaged. So is there any work that can or should be done, or what do you want people to know about reliability when it comes to the long-range mountains in particular? Because that was a prime concern for Liberty, and I would suggest for folks who live through Darkanel, a prime concern for ratepayers as well.
I understand that totally. So a stat, again, about the Labrador Island Link reliability, even with this past winter's icing issues in Labrador, that line also has been available 97% of the time. And so the concern about a line being unavailable for an extended period in the event that you had something more serious happen, we actually analyze what that would look like and then project what could that mean to customers. So that's a lot of the work that we're doing with the regulator, is understanding what does that look like and should we do anything about it. And if you think about the early years of any asset, because we would have issues on any asset at any point in time, whether that be a generator or a transmission line. So it's not unexpected that you're going to have something that occurs, and it happens, weekly, essentially. But what we want to do is understand in the early years of the Labrador Island downlink, where are we having those issues, and strengthen them. So the one that we had, you mentioned the turnbuckles that we're putting these extension straps in instead. We would have done the engineering analysis on the root cause, and we're going back with stronger components for the areas that need to be strengthened, because it doesn't have to happen everywhere. And so that's what these early years provide us, is the opportunity to find areas that need to be strengthened, that the weather conditions are not what was expected, analyze what the right solutions are, put those solutions in place, and then if you project ahead a few years' time, your line is going to be even more reliable than it is today. So that's really where we are. And using the example from last year with the turnbuckle issue, I think we had planned for a 4-year execution. We've made great progress last year. I even think, I'm probably putting myself out on the line here, but I think we might be able to get a couple of years' work done in this year. So it may not be the full 4 years that we have to do the work. We might even get it done in 3 years. So this would be year 2 that we're going to do this summer. And we're making really great progress on strengthening the line in those areas that's necessary.
I think, David, in speaking with your office, says that you can take a break here and join us right after the break to continue the conversation. Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, let's do exactly that. We'll put Ms. Williams on hold. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's rejoin the CEO of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro on 2. That's Jennifer Williams. Jennifer, you're back on the air.
Okay, thank you.
We've talked about the forecasted demand on the system, and people latched on to one of the recommendations of 150 watt megawatt diesel generator to be located at Holyrood, and you've said many times that that's just one of the recommendations. Are we any closer to finding out what would be additional capacity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're actually quite close, and thanks for this topic. It's an important one. I think it was in March that we filed our load forecast for the next 10 years. And so it projects us to the early 2030s and what we think the load could be at that point in time based on a number of factors. So, for example, population growth, which we can see the population is increasing. It also takes into account how many people are changing to electric vehicles, people that are switching from oil in their homes to electricity to heat their homes, and changes in industrial processes or new industrial activity. And what we did there is what we do is what all utilities do. They take all those factors and they say, well, what if this is a little bit higher? What if that assumption is a little bit lower? And then you come up with several scenarios of what you think the load could be. And so we submitted that information, to the Public Utilities Board in March. And we think that we should be building for about 13% increase, I think the number is, within about 10 years. So obviously, you don't go from, no increase today to 13% in year 10. This is going to be a gradual increase. So we really have to start on getting new solutions in place to make sure that we indeed have the power available for that significant increase 10 years out.
So is that 13% increase including or on top of the installation of an 8th generating unit at Bay d'Espoir?
So that 13% increase would be partially supplied by that unit at Bay d'Espoir, and we expect it's not in front of the regulator yet. So I am so I'm going to use the expression leaning a little out over my skis, but I don't think anybody would be surprised. We're going to need several solutions, and we think that one of the solutions would be a 8th generating unit at Bay d'Espoir. It's a great solution. It's an existing facility. It was always designed to be able to handle an 8th unit. Even when the 7th unit went in place, it was always contemplated an 8th one could indeed be constructed down the road. So that is our next great solution for us. The other one that we think we're going to have to recommend as well is essentially a backup/peaker unit at Holyrood. A combustion turbine that can use renewable fuels in the future. That would be, but we would need both, we believe. And then as well, again, you're going to think about 10 years out, not necessarily today, because it takes a long time to get these both through the approval process and constructed. And we think we're going to need some wind to supply energy to the system because, for example, that unit down in Bay d'Espoir is a capacity unit. I'm probably going too far, but you need to have energy as well. So we think that we're going to make a call for wind in the coming years as well.
So when we talk about a call for wind, are we talking about excess power with the onshore wind, or are we talking about the pending amendments to the Atlantic Accord to allow for offshore wind, or what do you mean by wind?
I think it would just be whatever we have access to. So it could come in a couple of different formats. It would probably be onshore because, for example, we have 2 wind farms now. Folks would be aware of. We've got 54 megawatts, I think it is, or 52 megawatts now. And so we would, whoever happens to be either here, we would say, for example, you might do an RFP. Okay, we need some wind folks, and whoever happens to be here, so if there's an existing wind farm, they would be a supplier to us. Or somebody may say, I see an economic opportunity there, I'm going to build a wind farm. Hydro doesn't plan on being in the wind ownership business. We plan on, procuring that in the form of a power purchase agreement in the way that we do that with some other outside sources now. So that's how we envision wind will be in our future.
And do we have any further understanding? Of course, final investment decisions have not been made, whether it be with Everac or World Energy GH2, but can you give us a clear understanding what we think the interaction between our grid and their systems would be? They'll have excess power at some parts of the year and vice versa. So do we know how that's going to work? Do we have any thoughts about what the price tag would be for that type of interaction? We've been told by the Minister, I knew, that all the infrastructure required would be on their dime, their bill. But can you help us understand how that interaction is going to work?
Sure. So those folks, we continue to work with a number of them to help them refine their business plans so that they can understand what assumptions they should make. And how I envision energy both flowing in both directions with such a business is not that different than how we do it today. And I'll use Corner Brook Pulp and Paper as an example. We purchase capacity from Corner Brook Pulp and Paper on peak. So when we need it, we will reach out to Corner Brook and say, can you curtail your operations, because we would like to use some of your capacity to make sure that we can meet island demand. And we have a commercial relationship set up that the Public Utilities Board has oversight over. So and they would know what is possible, and they would know what those commercial arrangements are. We also obviously supply them with power, and then they supply us also with energy. So I envision that the pending wind hydrogen companies, we would look very similar to them. So there will be a large industrial customer on this island, and I expect that we would be able to enter into relationships for all the kinds of exchanges that we have with other parties now. We could do the exact same thing with those folks. My mind bounces around. Just a quick question. How much power is being generated at Muskrat today? You said 400 megawatts is flowing across the Maritime Link. Is that all from Muskrat Falls or a combination of other power sources? And how much of the power is being consumed on the island from Muskrat? I'm going to load up my computer here, Patty, and find out for you as we're talking. So for going over the Labrador Island Link, it would be Muskrat Power, and I am going to load this up. So you can keep asking me questions if you like, and I will jump in and tell you what that number is. So it's going to open up my system viewer.
And while you get to those numbers, so we were always told that the firm output at Muskrat is 824 megawatts, I believe, and of course there's some power loss throughout the transmission across 1,100 kilometres. So I guess that's the base question. Have we ever generated as much as 824 megawatts? And what's going to Nova Scotia? What's being consumed here?
Oh, you're really testing my history now, but I'm pretty sure we did do the maximum power at some point, probably commission things, I think. Patty, I'd have to go back and double check. And can you just tell me what the last part of your question was? Just,
if there's 400 megawatts going to Nova Scotia from Muskrat, how much is actually being consumed on the island, say, in the past month?
Sure. Let me just open this up here now. And I will say again, we have, 20, 25 different generating sources. And so we don't use the Labrador Island Link and the Muskrat Falls Link as the only lever that we have. So we don't tap on as that's the only thing. And there's a whole host of factors that go into what we choose to accept. So, for example, if we're really full of water down in Bay d'Espoir, and we have storage capacity somewhere else, we're going to use Bay d'Espoir. So I'm just going to open this up here now. So right now, let me see. Nope, we're doing testing today with regards to Muskrat, with regards to the Lil. So that's fine. But I'll get you some better information on that. But you choose how to dispatch your units on the basis of a whole host of pieces of information. So if you have, again, like I said, a lot of water, I'm going to say out in Catarrh, you're not going to bring electricity down and spill at Catarrh. So you have to have a view to all of your assets, and you basically optimize how you're using your assets at any point in time.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense to me. A couple of quick ones before we run out of time, and I have to let you go. So I know you're on the 2041 committee. In Quebec, it's all the rage. I mean, I read the Quebec newspapers fairly frequently. They talk about 2041 and the Upper Churchill a lot. They also talk about Gull Island a lot. So can you give us some sort of update on the 2041 discussions or negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I get very clear and appropriate instruction from the Premier that we're not going to say very much publicly. We don't think it's actually appropriate for us to be saying much publicly, except for that, discussions continue. It's an incredible resource. There's essentially 4,000 megawatts undeveloped in Labrador, and you've got 5,500 megawatts coming open in 2041. And, we know that the people of the province expect us to get, appropriate value, for those assets. And so, I really am uncomfortable saying much beyond that, just to know that, we value those assets significantly, and we know that Quebec does as well. And that's why we are having these conversations. But I don't think it's appropriate to say much beyond that.
Should we expect some information this calendar year or this summer? What's the hope on that front?
The hope is that we continue to have conversations to eventual success.
Okay, fair ball. So when it comes to Gull Island, people talk about, power purchase agreements, us not being the prime customer. When the Atlantic Loop kind of fell apart when Nova Scotia backed out, it kind of took away some of that additional hydro capacity being developed. But just give folks a historical understanding, because it's not just Gull has popped up since we started talking about Muskrat Falls or the Upper Churchill. Historically, there's been some evaluation and been some work done on site. Can you tell us exactly what's been done over the years? Just give us a basic snapshot.
You mean with regards to the value of the river?
Well, at the 2,225 megawatts at Gull Island, what do we understand about the site? What kind of work has been done focused on Gull itself? Because there's lots of talk, again, about that being part of the conversation and the negotiations is to develop more power, whether it be for the northeastern United States and or for Ontario, Quebec, whatever the case may be. They talk about it up along. I'm just wondering, can you give us a snapshot of what actual work has ever been done at Gull Island, if that question makes sense?
Sure. Certainly when Muskrat Falls, the original, intention for a project for this province, Gull Island was, an important project to have some effort and intention and evaluation and engineering, environmental assessments completed. So, with regards to the potential to develop that asset, it is further along than an asset that's never been looked at or never had any attention paid to it. So it actually is, 2 or 3 steps down the road. And I will then, add to this that the river itself, and folks may know a little bit about this, but you could have an additional 2 units at Churchill Falls, and that could add 1,100 megawatts. You can upgrade the existing units at Churchill Falls, and you can add another 500 megawatts there, just on the existing units. So, the whole river itself is a really important resource to the people of the province, and I would say nationally, maybe even internationally. So there's been work advanced already, as you noted, on Gull Island, and there's information that we have available to us on those other opportunities as well, with regard to Churchill Falls 2 and with Churchill Falls plant itself. So, it's we have, we're not nowhere on these files, right? We actually could advance them, if it was the appropriate thing for us to do as a province and as a region.
And to advance Gull Island would include conversation with the Innu Nation. Based on rate mitigation packages, they say there will be no Gull because they're out to the tune of some $1 billion. Have those conversations begun with the Innu Nation, because they will indeed have a say in the development of Gull Island?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I very much regard Innu Nation as our partners. They're our partners in our impact and benefits agreement. I really have a lot of respect for and put effort into our relationship with the Grand Chief to make sure that they understand and feel the respect that we have for them. So they would be, have an absolute, participate with us if anything was to ever happen there.
With the glitches on the GE software, was there any cost recovery? Did they cover any of the bill when it talks about the extended schedule to get things on track?
A bit of a complicated question, because you have a series of updates of the relationship over the course of the years. So, from a plus minus perspective on the, I guess the commercial relationship is a laundry list of items as opposed to just one item.
Okay.
And so, it's a bit complicated to say we got something more here, they got something more there, that kind of thing. So it's hard to say, exactly what a dollar figure is.
I appreciate the time. We're late for the news, and thanks for the extended conversation this morning, Jennifer.
Thanks, Patty. Happy to come on anytime and explain anything that you would like us to talk about.
And we appreciate that. Stay in touch.
All right, take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. It's Jennifer Williams, CEO at NL Hydro. If you want to pick up on anything you heard there or bring up a topic of your choosing, you can do it right after the news. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back to the program. All right, let's go to line number 1. Mike, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning to you.
Patty, I'd like to go back, first of all, to the fire on the Beaumont Hamel back, I think it was December 2020.
Okay.
Anyway, during that fire, I don't know if you remember or not, I said then at the time, it's only a matter of time before a disaster hits the Newfoundland ferry system. This investigation into that fire was covered up, that the people who were directly responsible for it got away with it, as far as I'm concerned, without any repercussions. The person who gave the fire investigator permission to interview the crew after he was told one story by the people in Confederation Building, and the crews, that was two different totally stories altogether. And anyway, I don't know what happened to the final outcome of it, but I do know what the results were, was that the superintendent who gave permission for the investigator to interview the crews is gone. They got rid of him. The responsible person for that fire got his position as now superintendent or whatever, without proper qualifications, everything else. They're making all kinds of decisions in Confederation Building with no marine experience. They've got the veteran down there now in dry dock taking out parts that you don't have new parts for, replacing equipment that they now have the bugs worked out that is in good working conditions, and they're taking out good parts and that and whatever at a very expensive cost and delays in the refits. And basically the whole thing is done. Now with the Flanders, by the grace of God again, they've been saved by the crews again as regards to having a disaster, as far as somebody getting killed or whatever. And there's nothing being done about it. It's, pathetic of what's happening with all this. Now, that generator system and that stuff, I know all about that system. I was the one who designed it, installed it. I changed the generators. I changed the design of it from the time it was manufactured because it was problems with it for 17 years after she went into service. And what happened on board the Flanders should never have happened without human error. There's something there somewhere, and I don't believe it's crews. It all stems from the people in Confederation Building. Accountants, instead of looking for money to do refits right, they're telling the people, oh no, you can't do this because it's too expensive, or try to save money. Instead of doing the jobs of getting the money to get the work done, they're taking the role of the crews and the captains and whatever, and they're running the show. And if something happens out at sea, you got to be a qualified marine engineer, qualified captain, all kinds of qualifications. As soon as the boat ties up, it's taken over by a bunch of people without any qualifications, no certifications, no nothing, to authorize this work and get it done. And they're making all kinds of mistakes at the cost of the taxpayers, endangering people's lives and everything else on board of those ferries. And it's going to be only a matter of time before, like you said, the winds and the tides and everything else, an accident is going to happen due to this lack of experience in the Confederation Building. And, it's just ridiculous there what's going on, and especially like the veteran down there now. The system down there had some bugs into it. Like they had some breakers that had a faulty part into it that was breaking. So, okay, they made a robust part of it. You got to fix. They got all of the glitches fixed and that, whatever. But now these guys are going to take it all out, replace it with more equipment. But the only reason why this equipment is being replaced is because the people who've done it before wanted a contractor here who was working with them to do it, and the government have ostracized them and has done all kinds of damage, tried to put them bankrupt and everything else due to their vengeance and lack of experience and hiding
of what's going on to the people of this province.
So are you saying that the people working on the vessels don't have the required training and accreditation to do the jobs that they're tasked to do?
No, not the people on the vessels, it's the people in Confederation Building.
Okay, but the people in Confederation Building weren't on the Flanders when it caught on fire.
No, but they're the ones who just finished the refit and that and whatever, supposed to have everything all done. That fire should never have happened if the refit was done properly and the proper testing. The proper testing is done by class now because Transport Canada went out of it. So they've authorised class to do it, either ABS or DNV or Lloyd's, whoever is the insurer for the vessels. Now they're into a conflict of interest in that they're investigating the fire that because it wasn't properly tested or anything on the vessel before she came off refit. That fire should never have happened. Paddy, I was at this for over 50 years. I've done numerous fire investigations, damages, faulty, different things of that. And I know this vessel inside out. I put all the instruments in there. I done the testing. I maintained those vessels for years. And, there was never a problem or anything like this. And to have this kind of fire, now too, one important thing is that there's a spare generator. Now they don't know where the generator's to, where it's gone to, or nothing else. I put in one generator that burned out and needed to be rewound. The stator needed to be rewound. So that was a bit costly affair, tens of thousands of dollars. But the other generator was taken out on refit, and we did the testing of that and everything else, the commissioning and everything on the new one. But the old one was taken out, and all it needed was clean and probably a new bearing put into it. And it could have went back into service. Now, where's that generator gone to? I've heard that it's thrown out. I heard it was moved out to Lewisport. I don't know the actual facts, but I think that they threw out a perfectly good generator. And now they're going to be in trouble to get a new generator. And going to be all kinds of delays because of the people in the Confederation Building that don't know anything about marine work. But they're running the show. And they think that the engineers and the chiefs on board the boats are only second-class citizens. They're nothing. They don't have any respect for them. And they think that they can't do the jobs, and they got to do the job for them.
Mike, how do you know the proper testing was not done?
I don't, but I know that the proper testing wasn't done to get that fault. It could never have, if the proper testing was done. I know that system inside out. I know the safeties. I know what's there to protect it from this stuff happening. I've seen generators burned out. I've seen the exciters burned out. I've repaired them, rewound them, installed them. I've done it all. And I know that this fire like this should not have gone at that degree if it was probably done. The reverse current trips that are there to protect one generator from the other, for the two generators to go and trip out or whatever, or go off board, that should never be. There's protection there for all of that. What's going on there now? They were having trouble with the bow thruster before all of this, and more than likely the bow thruster was in use, that they could only go to, I think, 60%. There's a lot of different issues there that need to be answered. And I can guarantee you now that if the safeties and everything were all working, the short-term delay trips, the long-term delay trips, the instantaneous trips, all of this stuff is all there to protect all of this. So if the proper coordination study was done and followed, everything was all done to the way it's supposed to be done, this fire should not have happened without human error, and I definitely don't believe it was the crews.
I appreciate final thoughts, Mike, before I go.
Well, I know the loyalty of the crews and that and stuff on these vessels and that and stuff, whatever. But like I said, when you got a ferry system that when the boat docks, you got nobody with any marine experience looking after them. You got a bunch of bullies there telling the captains of crews what to do, and the captains of crews speaks up about it, they're fired, ostracized, like they did with the other marine superintendent. And they're basically bullying the people. The Confederation Building is bullying the crews aboard the boats to do their own thing, and they're like a clique in there that stick together and protecting one another.
I appreciate the time, Mike. Got to get going to the break.
Thanks for the chance.
No problem.
Patty.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, picking up on a conversation we had with a gentleman from PricewaterhouseCoopers about the artificial intelligence and productivity and premium wages and the like. Dave's in the queue to respond to the AI jobs conversation. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 4. Dave, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Morning to you.
How are you, sir?
Doing okay.
As usual.
A lot of information flowing around this morning, but I'm doing okay.
You're not kidding. There's a lot of information flowing around. It's kind of why I called in, because I experienced, I guess you'd say, an education in the last trip. I'm just back from the U.S. I was down in Florida. And one of the things from my last trip there that I really noticed, and it became prevalent why afterwards, was one of the statements that the gentleman from PricewaterhouseCoopers made when speaking about artificial intelligence was that it was in fact advancing quicker in the U.S. than it is in Canada, and I would have to agree.
That's not exactly what the assertion was, is that the use of AI inside Canadian companies and the amount of job ads being posted by Canadian companies versus American companies. So I think we're all on a very similar pace with how AI is involving in our lives. It's just whether or not Canadian companies are taking the same tactic or strategy regarding the adoption of AI. That was my takeaway.
Okay, yeah, kind of exactly where I was at, but I guess the most blatant thing to me was the prevalence of, first of all, just about everywhere you used to go in Florida just a short time ago, you saw help wanted signs everywhere. Restaurants, fast food takeouts, anywhere that you had point of entry or entry-level jobs, shall we say, they've been replaced. You go now to a drive-through at a food establishment, and you're talking to AI. You don't see a person. You don't talk to a person. You drive up to the window. Person delivers it to your window. I saw it even worse than that, where restaurants have taken on. You're ordering from like an app or like an iPad on your table, and there's actually robots and stuff delivering your food. Now, this is just the food industry that you see right front and center. I had a discussion with a fellow down there who was talking about the automation now of the food manufacturing industry, where so much of this is now starting to replace frontline jobs in those industries. I fear today that something like that happens. Now, I don't think me being wary of it's going to stop anything, but we should be aware that with the introduction of AI, there are going to be significant, major impacts on entry-level jobs and frontline workers first. We saw that here with self-checkouts. That's kind of the start of where AI is led to. I mean, it's not the artificial intelligence, but it does add an extra tier of difficulty for people like seniors to be able to shop and check out and handling goods and whatever the case may be. There's a lot of stores, there's nobody left around you. You have to be looking for a worker. Heaven forbid that you don't know how to use a kiosk and the preparations that you need to go through for flights. You get to a counter now, there's half the workers for Air Canada and others. There are these kiosks set up that are all replacing the people that used to help you. Even the process of going through customs has changed. What's coming is technologically considered to be advancement, but socially and economically, especially socioeconomics, I don't see it as a great thing. It's going to require certain things of the people, even certain job classifications where you have to have experience with AI in that industry. Like as was mentioned, I think that probably you're even seeing it now included in applications and qualifications required for working. That's what we got to be aware of, because I guess imminently we can't stop it.
No, we can't stop it, but
it's coming, and we better be ready for it.
I think, the issue here for me is the platform itself, not the fact that you're going to need these AI-related skills, because remember when we went from analog to digital, so many different jobs changed their requirements, whether it be for, use of computers or whether or not you knew how to use some of the Microsoft platforms or Excel spreadsheets. So those changes happened. It didn't really compromise the workforce necessarily. It's the fact that AI is very different in that some of the tasks that it can perform at breakneck speed used to take humans a week, right? So when you've reduced it to that level, it becomes different than whether or not I'm, computer savvy and I can use an Excel spreadsheet. I think that's the big difference that's coming here, which is why, we cannot fall for the trusting everything that gets pumped out by AI, because if it's a newly formed platform, whether it be ChatGPT or something that's coming behind it, if, like I said to Buddy from PricewaterhouseCoopers, if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. So it's going to be a pretty tricky piece of business to keep up with it, not only the advancements of AI, but the risks associated with it, of which there are many.
I would have to agree. Everything from identity theft to going after, you make the wrong move on an AI input or something, it might give access to personal information that you shouldn't want or definitely not want to have out there. Pardon me. That's from the airlines and the dry cough. But these type of things coming, I guess, are what we should be more prevalent of as a society who relies upon not only efficiency, shall we say, created for companies by eliminating the amount of human input, but also if you do so and these efficiencies are attained and the amount of human input is decreased, it ultimately ends in the same yard, that it's less opportunity for people to work, to make that paycheck, the whole 9 yards. So is this all about technological advancement that's needed? Is it about corporate profits? I don't see it essentially right now as being in the direct best benefit of the average Joe.
Well, it's hard to know how many jobs will be compromised. When the world of automation came, for instance, on the assembly line at the automobile manufacturers and or for other parts of the manufacturing world, it did compromise jobs. And how that's going to work with this particular advancement, I really don't know. But the key focus of that report really did look at what it means for productivity, what it means for premium wages, what it means for economic growth, of which the traditional way we measure the economy has changed. So if you listen to folks who are keeping their eye on things like productivity, we're falling behind in a variety of places. The value of data has changed and how we compile it and store it. The numbers of patents that are filed for intellectual property has distinct value, and we're falling behind. So I guess AI gets lumped into that conversation somehow. And I thought it was interesting to speak with that gentleman. I wish I had another half hour with him because I had a lot more I wanted to talk about with him. So, here's one of the findings. And I said quite clearly, posting for AI jobs is growing 3.5 times faster than for all jobs. For every job posting in 2012, there are now 7 job postings. So it's been changing for a while. It just seems to be changing very quickly in the last, couple of years or whatever the right number is. Dave, before we get to the news break, I'll give you the final thoughts.
Yeah, I'll go back to the point that you made when we made the change from analog to digital. We were told that this was some of the greatest things ever going to happen. And, of course, everybody thought this 5G and all this stuff was great. Well, going from analog to digital, if you even just compare that to cell service here on the West Coast, we're gone to a digital world as far as cell service is concerned, and it is the absolute worst it's ever been in this province's history. You try to drive from Bay St. George to Corner Brook now, traditionally there was one spot that you used to lose signal. It was around Blue Ponds Park. Now, you're lucky if you can get a signal between Bay St. George and Corner Brook. I had a conversation with a fellow the other day. I started when I came home from the airport, leaving from Deer Lake. I had to pick it up and rephone about probably half a dozen times before I got to the high country just before Bay St. George, and I picked up a good signal again.
Yeah, of course, but that's not about the technology. That's about the towers.
Well, it is, but it's when we had the old analog system and the old bag phones, that used to work in on the country. I could use that anywhere. Technology is not always a grand thing. And I don't think we should get lost in the fact that basically sometimes technology is great for some, but not for all. That's kind of what I see AI as.
Fair ball, Dave. Off to the news. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, buddy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, let's go ahead and take that break. When we come back, Dr. Todd Young is next, and then lots of time for you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go line number 2. Good morning, Dr. Todd Young. You're on the air.
Oh, hi. Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I just wanted to call in this morning. I just had something, kind of a moment yesterday that I just wanted to share with you. And I'm not calling with any partisan agenda here and whatsoever. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about a comment that was made this week by the PC candidate for Green Bay White Bay, and the election, of course, is on Monday. And yesterday, I was with my medical student who was from one of the two countries, or her origin, and she saw the video. And when I saw her mouth drop and the anxiety that was instilled upon her, and her first words were, "Oh my God, he's talking about me." And I that was a bit of an eye opener for me, because, you know, who am I to judge if this comment was insensitive, if it was inappropriate? Who am I to judge what the impact would be on another person? And you know, the reality is, in our community right now in Springdale, I mean, we have a multicultural representation. I'm actually the only one that's from Newfoundland. I mean, we depend on our healthcare services from people from all over the world. But when I saw the look on that medical learner, a potential recruit for our area, who wanted to come to a rural community to learn, and then to have on her last day to have an emotional response, it made me so sad. I just thought, you know what, this is what these comments, whether it's what the intent was or whatever, but it's groups who it was targeted to should be the ones to truly identify the complexities and the psychological impact of those words.
Well, I mean, words have consequences, right? I just didn't even really understand where it came from, because, people can take it from whatever angle they choose. But people who are not from here are less likely to say than people are from here. And that doesn't mean we're talking whether it be India, Pakistan, or from Lebanon or Egypt or from Germany, which I don't know how Germany came into the conversation, but that's just a fact of the matter. So to specify one country or another, or two countries in this case, I just don't even know what that means. I mean, we're told that there's been some 58 doctors in the last 3 years, or maybe 5 years, that were hired from India and Pakistan, and exactly 0 from Germany. So it just was very clumsy and ham-fisted, and it does have ripple effect, and it does have consequences. What they'll end up being, I guess we'll all find out.
Yeah, but so I guess what I'm saying is, even on that one learner, to see that real-time response certainly had a significant impact on me, because I thought, you know what? I mean, those words were impactful, hurtful, and it would be so upsetting for her to go back now and have a different perception, I guess, of coming to our community to learn, to work in the future, those types of things. So those comments were actually very counterproductive to what the topic of discussion was, which was physician recruitment and retention. It's also interesting just to read around, some of the what we call microaggressions and micro insults and things, and we have to be responsible for those. And then the reaction of the public, I think, has been quite surprising to me. Lots of people saying, well, he's not all wrong, or he's this or he's that. Those comments have had an negative impactful reaction. It has communicated words that are insensitive, that gestures superiority, and it divides. It doesn't. This is not an inclusive type of conversation that we should be having. Those microaggressions. I mean, I guess one thing about it is it does bring it to the forefront. And so those microaggressions, they hold their power because they're really invisible. And therefore, they don't allow us to see that our actions and attitudes may be discriminatory. And so, I just wanted to highlight that, in real time yesterday, a future physician for our community could have been affected, or it has been affected, or is affected by those words. And to me, that's what matters.
I appreciate the time this morning, Dr. Young. Anything else quick before I sneak on a few more calls this morning?
Oh, all good. Thank you, Patty.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay, let's keep rolling. Let's go to Leonard first. Good morning to the province's consumer advocate. That's Dennis Brown. Dennis, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty.
Good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm calling on the rape mitigation plan. The province announced the rape mitigation plan last Friday, a week ago, and the plan calls for the province, for the taxpayers, not the ratepayers as such, even though probably in many cases they're one and the same, to put $750 million of annual support to rape mitigation. So without rape mitigation, the electricity price would increase with Muskrat Falls to over 24 cents a kilowatt. That would be prohibitive for most people. With rape mitigation, the energy charge on your bill will rise from 13.2 cents currently to 13.5 cents. So rape mitigation and the input from the federal government, because it's the federal government who has put most of the money into this particular plan for us. Without that, the province will be in a real predicament. Because when you stop to think about it, Patty, $750 million a year, that's phenomenal money, isn't it?
Well, absolutely it is. $2 billion over 6 years.
Yeah, it's just it's an outrageous sum, and it just goes to show that there was never a business case for Muskrat Falls. If there had been a business case, they wouldn't need money. They would be able to sell power, et cetera, but there never was a business case. And the project was never properly debated in the House of Assembly even. So,
well, some of that starts with the fact that not even members of the House of Assembly were given all the factual, timely information. I think that's the most egregious part of this.
It was, and it was introduced by the Premier of the day to the House, the relevant legislation, in a private member's bill, if you can believe that, and that cut off any more debate than what a private member would be allowed in the House. So it wasn't even introduced as a government bill. That's all there. We had the commissioner, the Muscata project, that's what it is, and so on. But now we have Newfoundland Power out there ignoring the fact that we are in a financial predicament and that ratepayers are in a financial predicament, because the 13.5 cents that we now have, that we will have with Muskrat Falls beginning July 1, every year to pay for Muskrat Falls, that will rise 2.3%. So Newfoundland Power is out there now with a rate application trying to increase their own rate of return from 8.5% to 9.8%. And what that does is nothing for the ratepayers, but everything for Newfoundland Power's shareholder. Because right now, Newfoundland Power annually is making $48 million, $4 million a month. And if they were to get this increase, they would be getting in excess of $58 million annually. close to 60 million actually. So they'd be getting effectively $5 million a month from $4 million a month, all to their profit. It has nothing to do with their expenses. It's all about Newfoundland Power getting more profit for its shareholder. So it's quite a brazen application to put forward in this particular environment, where the province is in such a dilemma of having to come up with $750 million. And even though the federal government has contributed greatly toward that, that money could have been used for whatever, hospitals, teachers, everything that we would need. But it's being thrown into this bogus project, Muskrat Falls, which should never have seen the light of day.
What I'll be curious to see in the years to come, so if Hydro's talking about revenue streams at Hydro, deferred dividends to be part of this $740 million, it's not that long ago that we saw annual transfers from the provincial government to the Nalcor. I wonder if there's going to be a rebirth of that given this rate mitigation play. That's going to be fascinating to watch over the next 6 years or whatever time frame is appropriate. Final thoughts, Dennis, before I have to go, sir.
Well, Newfoundland Power, I should also add, its operational costs and its capital expenditures are way out of control. They're excessive. We've been saying that for a long time. So before Newfoundland Power looks for any cent for anything, any more money, they should be required to put their own financial house in order, because they can't come to us with their hands out all the time saying, give us more. In this particular instance, there is no evidence that they can come up with to justify looking for more profit, to move their profits from $48 million to in excess of $58 million. And when the hearing begins on June 13th, I should say, we will be pointing that out to the board. There's no way they can get anywhere near that increase, or really any increase at all. They're doing very, very well in this environment, and they're sort of ignoring the reality that the province and ratepayers are facing due to Muskrat Falls. Also, it must be remembered, Newfoundland Power didn't even speak out against Muskrat Falls, even though they knew it was a very difficult project. It had no business case. They could have spoken up at the time and said, why are we doing that? This makes no sense. But they did not do so. But now they're out there thinking that it can be business as usual for them. Well, it can't. I
kind of remember Stan Marshall saying that we have no interest in it, which was code for, what is this all about?
It's really unbelievable, wasn't it?
It is fascinating time frame. Dennis, I appreciate your time. Have a nice weekend. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, Patty, and same to you. All the best.
Bye-bye. Bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the newly launched Harvester Enterprise Loan Program. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number one. Say good morning to the FFAW Policy and Negotiations Lead. That's Abe Solberg. Abe, you're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay, sir. How about you?
I can't complain.
Good man. So curious timing, but people have been kicking this around for quite a long time, but now there's a new launch for Harvester Enterprise Loan Program. We won't get into how we got here, but how is it, what is it, and how does it work?
Yeah, so this is a program, it's an extension off the previous Fisheries Loan Guarantee Program that the province rolled out. And this one is different for a couple of ways, but probably the most significant one is that the province here is willing to put down a loan for the down payment. So for harvesters who are interested in getting into the industry, either buying a license, buying a vessel, retrofitting their vessel, something like that, but don't have the capital for that down payment, which is a massive barrier for young harvesters, the province here is willing to put up to $450,000 as a loan for that initial down payment with no interest for the first 5 years, and on the Bank of Canada prime rate, so a very low interest rate after that first 5 years. So this is really a massive first step to help people get into the industry, to overcome one of those big barriers, right? Because when you have folks who want to go in, get their own vessel, get their own enterprise, their own license, oftentimes to get that initial down payment, you'd have to turn to a processor, and this changes that completely. This is a way for people to enter the enterprise independent of a processing company. It's a really, really big first step.
Yeah, and having to deal with the processor on that front is technically not allowed and against the law. That's, it's what they call a controlling agreement. This was settled in courts in Nova Scotia a number of years ago. So on top of financial concerns to get into the industry, there's also some other hurdles, though, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's why I'm saying this is a first step, right, Patty? This is not not the only thing that needs to happen in order for us to increase participation in the fishery, cycle in new harvesters. But this is a really, really big one that allows people, one of those big hurdles that you hear frequently is just the money. This is an expensive thing. And the province here has said, we're going to help people, independent enterprises, get in. And I think that's pretty massive.
Can it also be applied to refinancing?
Yes, so thank you for bringing that up. That was the next point I wanted to make.
Okay.
The other thing about this loan, and this actually isn't new to the program, but it is something that I think hasn't really been advertised well enough, is that this program will refinance loans from a processing company. So say you had to go in and you take a loan out with some processing company, right? Now this program is willing to refinance that loan to remove you from that controlling agreement, right? So you can go in and get your loan refinanced, take it out of the processing company's hands and into a bank with the government of Newfoundland as your guarantor there, and it changes everything, right? This is a way for people to get out of those agreements very cleanly. Now, obviously, again, it's just a step, right? We don't know what the terms of a lot of these loans are, and folks might need legal assistance to get out of some of them. So this is just one way that can move that forward, but it's not the only one.
And, say if my loan is with RBC or TD or CIBC, it can be helpful to refinance, but that comes with some particular penalties that can be assigned to. So can some of the money be used to pay the penalties for breaking loan agreements?
Patty, I actually can't speak to that, but what I can say is that under this new arrangement, for these loans, if they get refinanced or whatever, one of the things that the government of Newfoundland is doing is so the loan program allows the bank to pay the bank's prime interest rate, which is currently 7.2%, plus 2 or 2.5%, depending on the type of the loan. But what this program is going to do also is going to provide a rebate for that additional 2 or 2.5%. So it's actually a cash rebate back. So should you end up with a higher interest rate that's for the first 5 years of your loan, they're putting money back into the harvester's hands to allow them to have a bit of a pocket or a pillow there to fall back on as they get their enterprise up and running.
Yeah, because that's a tricky piece of business. When you're already dealing with accredited lenders, then there's all sorts of terms for repayment because the bulk of their profit comes from compound interest. So, they're not interested in seeing people break their loans. So, in addition to all of this program, so is it $15 million in full? Is that the number?
I believe $50 million is the number that's been promised so far. I think that's split between some construction and new enterprises going in. But we're hoping that this program will have really good uptake and we'll be able to get more out of it, and it can be a continuing program going forward.
Yeah, I don't know if we know a whole lot about the criteria to avail of this monies, because, it's one thing to buy a vessel, quite another to have a fishing license, quite another to have an individual quota. So how do we measure who exactly are the best people for this program? Because the boat is just a part of the equation.
Yeah, so the eligibility for this program is folks who are registered as a full-time harvester from the Professional Fish Harvester Certification Board, and are eligible to hold a commercial fishing license. So it's those folks really who either already have a license or the young harvesters who are eligible for a license but aren't able to afford one. Those are the folks who are able to get in. And then the standards for getting the loan from the bank, obviously that varies bank by bank. But because the provincial government is the guarantor here, it provides a lot of that. It eases some of that risk, right, for a young harvester or someone who doesn't have an extensive credit history.
Yeah, because the province's ability to borrow and the rate at which they borrow is much different than mine or anybody out there interested in getting in the fishery. Abe, final thoughts very quickly before I sneak on one more call this morning.
Yep, just the final thing I want to say, unrelated to this program, is I want to give a big shout-out and full solidarity to the plant workers at Beothic right now who are voting for a fair deal. They came together resoundingly to authorize a strike over the weekend, and they brought that back to Beothic, and Beothic came back to them to the table with a fair offer that now they're voting on. So full solidarity to them. Shout-out to their bargaining committee, and I hope they get a fair deal. So that's all I have to say, Patty. Thanks so much.
I appreciate the time and the information. Good luck on your quest to be the next president.
Thanks, Patty. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Abe. All the best. Bye-bye. And, of course, Abe Solberg is one of the remaining two candidates. Dwan Street, also running for president. Let's go to line number 3. Final thoughts of the morning and the week go to 3. Tony, you're on the air.
Yes, Patty. I want to just speak on what Jerry Byrne had to say about the doctors and about how they're recruiting doctors from the other countries, and this this candidate, PC candidate, is hurting the people. Now, we got doctors here from the other countries, the same one they're talking about. Well, I know there's two that's working on the front desk because they can't get a job. Another one here, which had a clinic open for 5 years. I knew her personally. And she had to move to Toronto because her husband could get from the other countries, from another country, the same one they're talking about. And he couldn't get a job here. So she had to close her practice and move to Toronto.
Yeah, but that wasn't the point. That wasn't the point being made.
Well, that's what they're saying, that they're trying to recruit doctors from other countries. And they're turning around and saying, well, we're trying to recruit doctors. Yet we got doctors here from the same place, and they won't hire them because they don't qualify. And that's just what I'm saying. And then you have that other
college. That's not an issue with the government. That's an issue with the College of Physicians and Surgeons.
No, but at the same time, the government got to say, but if they're recruiting, that's not got nothing to do with the college. When they're out there saying they're recruiting and we're short of doctors and we're trying to get some from other countries. And then the same thing, they're turning around, we got doctors here and we're losing them because of this. And then you got the doctor on this morning saying he's not playing political, but why isn't he fighting government to try to hire these doctors on instead of getting on and trying to hurt it more than trying to help these doctors? So it doesn't mean, to me, it was all political to me. And then for him to try to do this and only making things worse instead of fighting government to hire these doctors, so to try to make it better and get more doctors hired.
You've had the last word, Tony. It's 12 o'clock. Appreciate the time.
All right. Have a good weekend,
You too, man. Bye-bye. All right, good show today. Boy, information overload. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again on Monday morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk on Monday. Bye-bye.
Ryan Seacrest here. When you have a busy schedule, it's important to maximize your downtime. One of the best ways to do that is by going to ChumbaCasino.com. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino games like spin slots, bingo, and solitaire that you can play for free for a chance to redeem some serious prizes. So hop on to ChumbaCasino.com now and live the Chumba life. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.